Quote Love, Unquote, by New Amsterdam. Chapter 23. Bakugou and Kirishima on the outs. It's been 2 weeks since we caught sight of Riot's guitarist and possible new frontman, Kirishima Eijirou, leaving Bakugou Katsuki's apartment. But while the two stars were previously seeming cozy and as close as can be, this time Kirishima was alone and looking none too happy. Since then, we haven't seen our favorite it couple together at all. Their star has been shining bright for over 6 months now, but have they finally burned out? Bakugou's latest film, Make My Story, is set to premiere this Friday, while Riot is back in the studio working on their sophomore album. We're eager to see what comes next for both of them, but we'd also like to know what's next for them as an item, or not. The headline flashes a garish red across the screen of Bakugou's phone, taunting him. He presses down so hard against the screen that the image, Kirishima with his head ducked down, hood over his hair and cheeks red, warps beneath the pressure of his fingers. Bakugou growls and tosses the phone away, and it lands harmlessly on the seat of his couch. His face scrunches in frustration. He would have rather the thing had cracked. 2 weeks, and Kirishima hasn't called or texted or made any signs of coming back. Bakugou should have known better than to hope for it. But some small, ugly part of him had thought that Kirishima's affection for him would win out over his hatred of himself. But apparently, Bakugou isn't even worth that much. His stomach churns as he marches away from his living room and towards the bedroom. How is it that loving Kirishima has made things worse? He's always known he's a lot to handle, but he's never wanted to consider that he might actually be poisonous. And yet, all he can think about is Kirishima's expression. His red eyes glassy with tears, his smile frozen on a face that didn't match it. Bakugou had done that to him, had insisted on dredging up those feelings just for his own peace of mind, to make sure that he hadn't ruined things all these years ago. He'd been selfish, and the cost had been having Kirishima in his life. Why hadn't the arsehole called? They'd been working the same way for months. Bakugou would push and push and push, and Kirishima would come back, no matter what. Why is this time so different? Bakugou yanks open the door of his closet and pulls out a sleek grey garment bag. There's a note affixed to the hanger, written in Aoyama's stupidly curvy cursive. Bonjour, Monsieur Bakugou. Here's your outfit for the premiere, perfectly fitted as per usual. Tell me, am I to dress Monsieur Kirishima for this event as well? Bakugou takes the note in his hands and rips it in halves, and then into fourths. It's too small to rip any more than that, and so Bakugou grinds out a curse between his teeth and lets the pieces fall to the floor like confetti. That French fucker is fishing for gossip, and they both know it. If he had to dress Kirishima for that premiere, he'd already know about it. And he's probably been whispering behind Bakugou's back with Higakure and Eijirou, speculating about his relationship and breakup. They've all probably been doing the same. Even Todoroki had texted yesterday with a simple, "You okay?" And Bakugou had known that he just wanted to hear the story. They treat him like a lion or a bear caged up in a zoo, prowling up to the bars and roaring for the crowd's entertainment. He refuses to put his emotions on display for them. Not this time. He'd never invited Kirishima to the premiere. 2 weeks ago, it had seemed like a given that they'd go together, that Bakugou could mention it a day before, and Kirishima would just be there. Because they belonged to each other. With each other. And now all of that is gone. He rubs the back of his hand furiously across his eyes as he unzips the garment bag and pulls out his clothes. It doesn't fucking matter. Makeup will cover anything he doesn't want seen. He casts a dark shadow across the red carpet, a solitary figure that draws all eyes. Sleek black slacks, a crisp white shirt, and a red suit vest that shines with metallic threads and subtle embroidery. Aoyama had attacked his face with makeup brushes and eye pencils, leaving him with deep red at the corners of his eyes, and a subtle bronze highlighting his cheekbones. He keeps his expression as impassive as a statue's, daring anyone to try and see through his facade. He doubts anyone will. Aizawa and Fukukado are already being swarmed by the press. Aizawa in black pants and a loose grey sweater, his hair tied back and his face clean-shaven for perhaps the first time in years. Fukukado in a burnt orange romper that leaves her arms bare, her pale green hair loose around her face. "Well, it's always been a laugh working with this one," Fukukado says, giving Aizawa a sly look and elbowing him in the side. "You just can't resist my jokes, you know." Aizawa sucks in a breath. Looks like he's praying to any deity that will hear him for strength. "I have never once laughed at any of your jokes." Bakugou almost considers walking over to them, facing the barrage of the press with the director and writer beside him. Fukukado and Aizawa's personalities are distracting, and they'd keep things on the topic of the movie and not on personal matters. But Bakugou Katsuki isn't a coward. He's not going to hide behind Aizawa, not when he's been dealing with the press for his entire life. He doesn't need a shield, or need anyone beside him. Next to him, someone whistles lowly and drapes an arm across his shoulders. "Look who's cleaning up so nicely." He doesn't flinch, but he does briefly consider breaking one or two of Shindo's fingers. Because who else could it be but Shindo, dressed in an impeccable forest green three-piece suit, his dark hair artfully ruffled, his eyes gleaming like stars in the night. Whoever dressed him knows exactly what they're doing, accentuating his long legs and broad shoulders. This is Bakugou's world. It's full of bright lights and color, beautiful people and extravagance. But it's so goddamn hard to fight through the flashing lights and fake smiles and find something real hidden there. No one proves that better than Shindo Yu. "You have 3 seconds to get off me," Bakugou mutters to him, out of the corner of his mouth. "Come on, Bakugou," Shindo says, slipping his arm down so that his hand hovers over the small of Bakugou's back. "We've got a show to put on tonight." Bakugou deliberately steps in front of him, keeping a half-foot of space between them. Shindo hardly seems to mind, waving and smiling at the crowds, while Bakugou stomps ahead with his typical arrogant defiance. They're both forces of nature in their own ways, but Shindo is someone deceptively inviting, while Bakugou never balks from what he is, what he wants the world to see. After they've walked the red carpet and had their picture taken approximately 1,000 times, the cast and crew enter the theatre together. Bakugou and Shindo walk up to the front of the auditorium, and Shindo takes the microphone first. "Welcome to the premiere of Make My Story," he says, his voice booming. "It's a very special little film that we've been working on, and we hope you love it as much as we do." He passes the microphone to Bakugou, who takes it before looking at the crowd and freezing. He has a canned line, some platitude to introduce the film before it screens for the industry. Something simple and innocuous, so that no one really has to confront what it is this film is about to do. Bakugou grinds his teeth. Fuck that. "As actors, we're always telling someone else's story," Bakugou says. He feels Shindo stiffen beside him, registering that these aren't the right words. But he doesn't care. He keeps going. "But like this arsehole said, this movie is special. It's not just telling the same story, the same person's story. So pay attention, because you're going to want to see it all." He returns the microphone to its stand and stalks off, just as the auditorium goes dark and the introductory music starts to play. He's not playing himself in Make My Story. The character's different struggles, a different relationship. But he's closer to the truth than Bakugou's ever gotten, and that's a dangerous feeling. He's proud of his work, but when his own life is so broken, how can he be satisfied with some on-screen happiness? Some stars like to watch premieres from within the midst of an audience. Others have to wait outside and pace because of the nerves. Tonight, Bakugou stalks up to one of the balconies. He watches from above the crowd, taking in their reactions without really participating in them. Soon, however, he's not paying attention to the audience at all. This is his first time seeing the finished product, and he can honestly appreciate Aizawa's cinematography and direction. The mood of the movie is dark and inviting, the characters lighting up the screen with charm and warmth. Fukikado's snappy dialogue keeps the audience laughing, until those moments when they gasp or cheer. Bakugou leans in, gets wrapped up in the story. By the time the ending credits roll, he forgets it's him on the screen, forgets he's been part of making this story. All he sees is two men, happy and in love, and his heart flares with jealousy. "So, where's the boyfriend tonight?" Shindo arrives on the balcony before the auditorium lights go on, leaning against the railing and looking out over the crowd. "Go fuck yourself," Bakugou mutters, still half distracted by the movie. Shindo huffs out a laugh. "I thought it might be like that." "Like what?" Shindo turns around, still leaning against the railing, but now facing Bakugou. "That was some timing on the publicity. You come out right before taking this movie and find such a golden boy to be your boyfriend? And then just before the movie comes out, it's over, so the press can focus on the finished product. Ingenious. I'm mad my press team didn't come up with it." For a moment, the image of Shindo and Kirishima on magazine covers and tabloids together flashes through Bakugou's mind. His blood turns to acid in his veins, every inch of his body alighting with fury. "Why the hell would they need to?" he demands. Shindo shrugs. "I'm not ashamed to admit I'm using your star power to cushion any repercussions this movie might have had on my career. I've told you before, haven't I? We're not all the invincible Bakugou Katsuki." Rage builds up inside of him, and Bakugou isn't yet sure what its final target will be. The idea that Shindo has been using him is unforgivable. "I don't know what your deal is," Shindo says, voice still casual and friendly. "But it's harder, in some ways, when you're bi. Everyone wants you to just fall in line, date a nice girl, not rock the boat too much unless it's for some slightly risque photo shoot. But I wanted a role like this, too. So thanks for taking all the heat." Sero had filtered out a lot of the backlash, but Bakugou knows not everyone was happy with his coming out, with his taking a role in a film with a same-sex romance. He doesn't really care what those people think, and Shindo's right about one thing. Bakugou's star burns bright enough to weather these sort of storms. If Make My Story does well, no one will blink at the idea of Bakugou doing another gay drama. His sexuality will start as ancillary to his art, and eventually become incidental. "But the press boyfriend," Shindo says with a laugh. "I really, really wish I'd thought of that." He thinks that Bakugou is just as calculating as he is. He thinks everything that happened with Kirishima was an act, a front, to ease the way into this film. And the worst part is, Bakugou can't deny it. Their relation started as damage control, something completely contrived. Is that what he and Kirishima are going to go down in history as? A publicity stunt that only lasted a few months. The thought is unbearable. It makes me wonder, you know. Shindo pushes off from the railing, takes a few steps towards Bakugou. What else would you do to keep all the eyes on you? Bakugou is still sitting back in his auditorium chair, unprepared when Shindo places a hand on the handrest to either side of him, leaning in close so that their faces are nearly touching. Even after so many months spent with him, shooting a movie with more than one intimate scene, Bakugou still can't figure Shindo out. He knows he's playing some sort of game, angling for some hidden motive. But Bakugou doesn't know what that motive is, and that makes Shindo endlessly dangerous. Shindo tilts his head, considering. His gaze lingers on Bakugou's lips. Bakugou could shove him away. He could duck around him. He could grab Shindo by the collar and hoist him over the balcony. He isn't trapped. There are half a dozen ways he could get out of this situation without making an incident of him. But he doesn't know if he wants to do that. He's been fixated on Kirishima, on the person he expected Kirishima to be for years. He's never defined his sexuality, even to himself. Just knows that he likes Kirishima, and Kirishima is a man, and at the intersection of those lies his own preferences. He's never really had an active interest in other people, and assumed that he just doesn't have any great need for them. But it's been 2 weeks since he's been with Kirishima, and he's already so goddamn lonely. He doesn't know what's wrong with him. He hates himself for feeling this way, but he wants the comfort, the affirmation of another's touch. His eyes flutter closed, and he angles his face upwards. He can feel Shindo's breath against his cheek. In the split second before Shindo's lips touch his own, Bakugou imagines that it's someone else who's come to the premiere with him, who's leaning down to kiss him now. Someone with bright red hair and an infectious laugh, who believes him more than anything and takes the time to understand him when no one else will. He knows what kissing Shindo is like, and it's not what he wants or needs. He fists a hand in Shindo's shirt and wrenches him away, standing up as he lets go so that Shindo falls in a crumpled heap at his feet. "Don't," Bakugou says dangerously. "Ever try that shit with me again." Shindo laughs, a brittle and sharp sound in the quiet of the auditorium. He picks himself up and dusts off his suit, casting his assessing glare over Bakugou. "Hey!" someone calls out. "What's going on?" It's a bright voice, a hopeful voice. It sounds just a little uncertain. It's painfully familiar. Bakugou remembers the relief, the joy he'd felt when Kirishima had interrupted him and Shindo at the bar. How even though he didn't need Kirishima's support, he'd felt better just having him beside him. But this isn't Kirishima's voice. Bakugou doesn't get to be that lucky twice. "Aizawa-san's about to head to the after-party," Deku says. He's in a plain black suit with a red tie, his hair messy and his freckles stark against his cheeks. "I came to look for you, Ka-chan." He steps into the already crowded space of the balcony, half smiles at Shindo. "And you, Shindo-san? I guess you'll all want to go together, right?" "Midoriya-kun," Shindo says, face lighting up. "I didn't know you were coming. It's so nice to meet you." He takes Deku's hand and shakes it vigorously, smiling all the while. Bakugou looks at Deku's face, sees the way his green eyes narrow for a moment, like he's trying to figure Shindo out. Shit. Of all people, Deku is the only one who sees it too. "It's nice to meet you, Shindo-san," Deku says, carefully pulling himself away. "Should we get going?" Should he be mad that Deku showed up at that moment? His default response to Deku's very existence has always been anger, so it's hard to tell what he's feeling beyond that. Bakugou rides to the after-party in the limo with Shindo, Fukukado, and Aizawa. Fukukado is cracking jokes, Shindo is laughing uproariously, and Aizawa is leaning against the car door, trying to take a power nap. Bakugou stares out the window, turning only to glare at Shindo when he feels his stare on him. His head isn't any clearer as he endures the toasts and celebrations, finally stalking off when the others are pulled away by friends and fans and well-wishers. He's sitting out on the patio, back leaned against the wall when Deku joins him. He's expecting it, so he barely looks up to mutter, "Fuck off." Deku ignores him, takes his seat a few feet away, and folds his hands in his lap. "I didn't mean to interrupt, but what was that exactly?"
"None of your goddamn business."
Bakugou stares out at the sky, not even giving Deku the honor of a glance.
"What the hell are you even doing here?"
Deku sucks in a breath, and it's hard to tell whether it's apprehension or frustration. "I go to all your premieres, Kachan. I have since we were little kids." Of course, Bakugou knows that. It just still makes him feel uneasy, like Deku is nipping at his heels and waiting to tear him apart, to study him from the inside out. Because if Deku isn't tagging along with him to bring him down, why else is he doing it? Bakugou has never returned the favor. The bitter jealousy and resentment he'd felt when Deku started starring in Yagi-san's movies has kept him away from any of Deku's premieres that he didn't absolutely have to go to. He hasn't walked a red carpet with him since the UA days. Deku twiddles his thumbs for a moment, then looks up to ask, "Did something happen to Kirishima-kun?" The whole goddamn world knows something happened. Why Deku has to ask in such an insufferable way, Bakugou doesn't know.
"Why the fuck do you care?"
Deku takes in another of those long, irritating breaths. "I'm not trying to pry. It's just that Jiro-san told Yayozuru-san, who talked to Todoroki-kun about it, and then I was talking to Todoroki-kun, and it wasn't like we were gossiping about you, but you and Kirishima-kun are both our friends, and I thought that everything was going really well, so I guess it surprised me when I saw that he didn't come with you tonight. And I know Jiro-san and Kirishima-kun and the others would have been here unless something had happened." Bakugou smacks a hand over Deku's mouth, cutting off his rambling.
"Fucking hell, Deku. When are you gonna learn to just shut up?"
Deku shrugs, pulls away from Bakugou's hand, and offers a sheepish smile. He smiled like that as a little kid, too. Bakugou turns away.
"People break up. It's not news."
Deku purses his lips. "I mean, in our lives." He shrugs. "I'm just wondering why." Irritation sparks against Bakugou's skin.
"What? You acting out a breakup soon? Need some new material to make it look good?"
Deku waves his hands in front of his face. "It's not like that. It's never been like that." They've tried to have this conversation a dozen times, and it's never gone any further than this. Bakugou doesn't know why Deku still tries, why he keeps trying to pull Bakugou back into the fold, why he shows up at every one of his premieres like they're best fucking friends.
"What the fuck is it like?" he roars. "Explain it to me, stupid Deku, if you know so much."
"I'm trying, if you just listen." Deku clenches his hands, sucks in a deep breath like he's trying to calm himself down before he continues. "You're amazing, you know. You've always been so good at this." He says it begrudgingly, like he's mad about that. Bakugou stares at him. None of that is news to him. You gain all this insight about characters and how they should act or react, and it's all from inside you. It's like you don't need other people to make your own acting seem real. We were so little when they cast that All Might movie, but everyone could see you could do it all. The happiness and the fear and the determination. You were perfect for that role. He doesn't want to hear this. He wishes he'd never taken that role, because as talented as he was, he couldn't stop from destroying All Might, from being the reason Yagi-san lost his career. And now the same thing is happening all over again. He loves Kirishima more than he's ever loved anyone, but all his love and all his talent just makes Kirishima feel worse about himself. He's fucking poison,
and it's taken him over a decade and countless reminders to finally see it.
I can't be like you, Kachan, Deku continues quietly. I have to see how other people are, what their emotions are, to know what I'm supposed to act like. You get all that insight from yourself, but I need to see it from others. I know you're still mad at me for what happened with UA, but I wasn't trying to steal it from you. I was trying to connect to you, and to everyone watching the show, to give them a story they could believe in. Bakugou clenches his hands into fists. That was the entire reason he wanted that storyline in the first place. To see someone who felt like him on screen, even if he had to put that character there himself. Maybe he should have known that the Ayane-Nobuhiko romance was too developed at that point for them to switch gears. But he wanted it so badly, and fought for it as hard as he could.
It didn't matter to you the way it mattered to me, Bakugou insists, teeth grinding together like pestle against mortar. You don't know that, Deku yells back. His cheeks turn pink, and he leans back, embarrassed. What? Bakugou says, nearly dumbfounded. You're telling me you're gay? Deku makes a face like he's just bitten into a lemon. Bi, maybe. I'm still figuring it out. Bakugou rolls his eyes. Trust Deku. Fucking Deku to start figuring it out 5 years after the fact. Bakugou doesn't know if this revelation makes things better. And it's certainly not a shocking one, not to someone who's known Deku his entire life. But it makes things make sense to him in a way that they hadn't before. When he was a teenager, feeling trapped by his role in UA and desperate to express himself, his true self, in any way that he could, the storyline of two boys falling in love had meant everything to him. Really, all he's ever wanted is the freedom to make meaning of his own identity. Don't tell me kissing Todoroki was your big realization, Bakugou mutters, running a hand over his face. Deku laughs nervously, cheeks going from pink to a brilliant red. Idiot. Bakugou's mind goes in circles for a moment. He wanted to express himself and connect to others, and Deku was able to forge that connection, and in doing so discovered a part of himself. Ugh. It's almost like he got what he wanted, but not in the way he wanted it, and Bakugou doesn't know if he can live with that. They stare at each other, for once in silence. The air between them is charged with heat, with years of connection and aggression and frustration. Have they always been closer than they realized? All this would be so much easier if he could just punch Deku without it ending up on the tabloids. He tugs at the roots of his hair, suddenly feeling entirely too constricted in his button-up shirt and vest. I'm ruining him, he mutters, staring back at the ground. What? Fucking Kirishima. He thinks I'm so goddamn great, likes me too much, that he doesn't think anything of himself, because I'm around being too fucking amazing or some shit. Deku passes his lips. Ah. That's it? Ah? Bakugou taunts. So much for Deku wanting him to talk. Deku shakes his head. No, I'm just thinking. Maybe I understand a bit of how Kirishima feels. I spend a lot of time watching people, trying to learn from them, but sometimes that's hard. You focus on everyone else's strengths, and sometimes you forget your own. It's taken me a long time to learn how to be strong because of those I admire, instead of thinking less of myself. Bakugou is sure there was a way for Deku to say that in half the time. So? He demands. What the fuck am I supposed to do about it now? Deku lets out a watery little laugh. You're asking me? I don't have fucking anyone else to talk to, dipshit. Bakugou growls at him.
Deku smiles at him, warm and admiring. But his admiration of Bakugou hasn't dwarfed him. He's Yagi-san's golden boy, one of the top actors of their generation. All while Bakugou is trying to run ahead, Deku's done his own thing and come out on top for it. It's infuriating, but also somehow a relief. Here's the one person that Bakugou didn't ruin. Maybe try and think of it from his point of view, Deku says.
What the hell does that mean?
Deku shrugs. Just, who do you admire, Ka-chan? Make My Story shatters records on its opening weekend. Never before has a tiny art house film garnered such attention, especially not one that portrays a same-sex romance. Critics are astounded that the story manages to reveal true human emotion and vulnerability without killing off one or both of its charming leads. Bakugou reads that line in the paper and snorts out a laugh. He's out on a press tour to promote the film, so it takes him a few days to actually act on Deku's advice. It also gives him a few days to decide whether he's going to act on Deku's advice, and how he feels about it. It's Wednesday morning, the sun shining brightly overhead, and casting a glare against the newly fallen snow. Bakugou trudges his way up to the front door, notices that no one's shoveled the snow off the drive yet. He scowls as he knocks on the door 3 times in quick succession. It takes a moment for the house's occupant to answer him. In that time, Bakugou looks around at the carefully kept flower beds blanketed in snow, the clean white roof over the buttercup yellow house. It's a charming, nondescript place out in the suburbs, far away from the public eye. Bakugou swallows thickly and tastes acid on his tongue. Is his admiration poisonous? Does the person in this house even want to see him? The door swings open, revealing the skeleton of the actor formerly known as All Might. He used to be a man of incredible height and muscle, with brilliantly gold hair and booming laugh. Bakugou can't help but see him that way still. "Bakugou, my boy," Yagi-san says, voice lifting in surprise. "What are you doing here?" His voice is cut off by a cough, and he lifts his hands to cover his mouth. Bakugou looks on in horror, unsure of how to offer support. All at once, he's 5 years old again, and he's sure that when Yagi-san lifts his hands away from his mouth, there will be blood on it. But just as suddenly, Yagi-san straightens up, his hands clean. He looks down at Bakugou and smiles kindly, though when he speaks, his voice is firm. "Stop looking for what isn't there." He hasn't met Yagi-san's eyes yet. He's no one's coward, so he clenches his hands and forces himself to look up. Even hunched over, Yagi-san stands at an impressive height, but his arms hang limply from his sides, and his pants sit awkwardly on his thin hips. His blonde hair is lank around his face. His bright blue eyes sunken and surrounded by the loose skin of gaunt cheeks. Bakugou isn't a fucking doctor. He doesn't know what would have happened to Yagi-san if he'd undergone intensive treatment sooner. The cancer had been bad, completely debilitating. The fact that Yagi-san has lived to see the past 15 years is nothing short of a miracle. But Bakugou still feels his eyes prickling with hot tears as he sees the shadow that he's become. Yagi-san clears his throat. "My boy, would you like to come in for tea?" At a loss for what else to say, Bakugou can only nod sullenly and follow Yagi-san inside. Yagi-san takes his coat as Bakugou toes out of his shoes. They head together to the living room,
and Bakugou sits down on the couch as Yagi-san wanders away for the tea. The walls of the house are covered in old photographs, posters, and newspaper articles. There's a lot of Yagi-san as All Might, and a case containing his awards. But there are also newspaper clippings and reviews of UA, pictures of Deku and Todoroki standing with Yagi-san, and a blurred photograph that looks like it was taken in an izakaya, showing Yagi-san, Aizawa, Yamada Hisashi, and a woman Bakugou vaguely recognizes from the parties thrown by Kirishima's record company. There are older photographs, too, of a dark-haired woman in beautiful gowns and sleek suits, smiling out on the camera like the sun shining down on the earth. Then there are bookshelves, full of scripts that Yagi-san has directed since coming back into the industry. He swallows against the metallic taste in his mouth. Yagi-san has kept living these past 15 years. Bakugou had caused him to go into retirement, but Deku and the others had pulled him out and made him something great again. It isn't fair. Yagi-san returns to the tray of tea and sweets. He sets a cup down in front of Bakugou, the aroma of matcha filling the air. Bakugou stares down at his tea, shoulders hunched. "You've gotten so tall," Yagi-san says, taking his own cup and sitting down in an armchair. "Remember you used to say you were going to grow taller than me?" He'd been a stupid kid then, balanced on top of All Might's shoulders. He felt invincible, because he thought All Might was invincible too. "Well, I didn't," Bakugou mutters, still staring down at his tea. "You're still a giant." Yagi-san hums thoughtfully, but he doesn't have much to say to that. Bakugou keeps one hand curled around his cup of tea, looking down into the green foam. "I wish you'd look at me, Bakugou, my boy," Yagi-san says, after a moment's awkward silence. But he can't. If he looks up, he'll have to see All Might, Yagi-san, as he is now. The hero of Bakugou's childhood really will be gone. "You think you can ask me something like that?" Bakugou mutters angrily, even though he knows he's being unfair. Why is it so much easier to be mad at the people you've wronged, instead of the people who have wronged you? "I hope I can," Yagi-san says, laughing a bit. "I care about you a great deal." Bakugou remembers when he could believe that, when he was a stupid little kid who could be wrapped up in All Might's massive arms, or riding his shoulders, or hanging off of just one of his biceps. When he'd run around set, imitating All Might's action shots, and the entire crew had crowed about what a little darling he was. He hears Yagi-san sigh, but he cuts him off before he can speak. "Why do you want me in your stupid movie anyway?" He looks up now, because he wants the truth. Yagi-san sits with his elbows against his knees, his blue eyes shining with an inner fire that was never quite visible before. He smiles wanly. "Which answer will make you happy? That I want your talent for my movie, or that I want to include you because of our relationship?" It startles Bakugou that he doesn't know. For so long, he's thought that if people recognize what he can do, it doesn't matter what else they think of him. And as long as he's the best and everyone knows it, he won't need anyone else. But somewhere along the way, that ambition had changed. He'd wanted people to see him, the real him, and appreciate and admire him for it. To like him and care about him. He just wants to feel connected to the people around him, instead of like someone surrounded by barbed wire, too dangerous to feel close to. Yagi-san smiles at him kindly, that fire still blazing in his eyes. "I'm very proud of you, Bakugou, my boy. I'm sorry it's taken you so long for you to know that. I thought maybe you didn't want my support, but you've been made to handle so much on your own.
I'd like the chance to do something with you. To make something we can all be proud of. Yagi-san's validation feels like a warm fire inside him. A flame that grows stronger every second that Bakugou accepts the truth of what he's just said. It's a precious thing, but it's not the only thing he needs. Yagi-san isn't the only person he needs. He rubs the back of his hand across his eyes. Yeah, whatever. We know that no one else could pull off being the Dragon King without making it into a fucking joke. Yagi-san gets to his feet, sets down his teacup, and comes to stand in front of Bakugou. He places his thin hands on Bakugou's shoulders and pulls him into a hug. It isn't like a patented all-might embrace, which made Bakugou feel like nothing could touch him. Yagi-san's too thin and frail for that now. But when he presses Bakugou's head against his chest, Bakugou can hear the beat of Yagi-san's heart. Let go, All Might, Bakugou grumbles. I'm not a baby. He doesn't realize his slip until Yagi-san has stepped away, smiling at him knowingly. Bakugou jumps to his feet, growls out, Do you have a shovel around here? Yagi-san blinks. I'm sure I do, but why? Because I'm going to shovel your drive since no one else is bothered. Bakugou spits out, stamping towards the front door. He hears Yagi-san chuckle behind him, but stops short when he sees an old picture on the wall. It's Yagi-san in his All Might costume, flexing for the camera with another man, dressed all in red, standing beside him. I ruined him, Bakugou mutters, reaching out to touch the glass in front of the photograph. All Might seems to belong to another era now, a relic that belongs in a museum. Yagi-san comes up behind him, presses a hand against Bakugou's shoulder. You couldn't do that. But that's the nice thing about movies, isn't it? Those will never be gone. Bakugou purses his lips, forces himself to nod. Maybe, if Yagi-san reminds him of that fact often enough, Bakugou will eventually start to believe it. Or maybe he can't just hear it from one person. If he lets more people into his life, will it make the dips and downturns seem less catastrophic? Will it make this horrible aching loneliness turn into something else? For now, he turns his attention to the other man in the picture, brows scrunching as he thinks through what he needs to do. If he wants the life he's choosing for himself, wants to be the person he imagines he can be, wants to be with the person he loves. Yagi-san. Yes? You're going to do me a favor. I'd be delighted, of course. What is it?